First of all, welcome to 2018. Welcome back to school in the semester and the CSU. As you can tell, we're missing a couple of people across the room, so I've got a list of excusals to deal with. First, I'll go and read the Native Solidarity Statement. So we'd like to acknowledge that Concordia University is on the traditional territory of the Ganyingehaga, a place which has long served as a site of meeting and exchange amongst nations. The Concordia Student Union recognizes and respects the Ganyingehaga as the traditional custodians of the lands and waters on which we meet today. So a roll call sheet should be coming shortly, and I've received a request for excusal from Tabia, Ali, Alianor, Kemi, and Julia, all of whom are out of the province or out of the country and can't make it to the meeting today. So if council would like to excuse them, that is their prerogative. Yes, sorry?
Motion to omnibus excusal all of the aforementioned parties.
All right, do we have a second? Ali? Thank you very much. Is there any discussion? All right, so all those in favor, please raise your placards. 12, all those opposed? None, and any abstentions? 1. Perfect, so that carries. At this point, we're on approval of the agenda. So if there's any modifications, additions, subtractions, amendments, please raise your hands now. Yes, Ali?
The motion I sent you, the
Yep.
one, yeah.
All right, that is already preemptively added. Thank you. Awatif?
I'd like to take out clubs from informational, please.
Okay. The executive report?
There is a point called club.
Oh, clubs. Oh, you want to remove it. Oh, okay, okay. I understand. Sorry. Apologies. All right, Omar?
I would like to add retreat
Okay.
for informational.
All right. Is there anything else? Yes, Michaela?
Can I add the election reform ad hoc committee for returning business informational?
Right. Okay, is there anything else to be added or removed from the agenda? All right, so in that case, we can proceed to a vote. So all those in favor of approving the agenda as amended and all items under consent, please raise your placards. 13, all those opposed? And any abstentions? All right, so that carries. I just realized no one has placards, that's why this looks strange. Saw something was off. Okay, hopefully those will also be coming shortly. Okay, so that being said, if you give me 2 seconds, I'll just update the agenda and post it in the Facebook group so we all have access to it. So it is uploaded in the group, and with that we can move past presentations and guest speakers since there are none, on to appointments. So these are the ad hoc committees, so for, the standing committees. So for new councillors, in the standing regulations there are several committees of council. I can't remember if I went over this last week, but this is where the specialty happens, basically. So instead of having long, drawn-out discussions on matters that can be dealt with in a committee meeting, those go to committee. So if you're part of the Loyola Committee or the Policy Committee, it's like you're specializing in that topic. So you're going to review documents, you're going to pass motions that pertain to matters of the committee. And each executive has or chairs their own committee, save for the general coordinator as ex officio rights on all committees. And they will explain their respective committees. So Gabby, Loyola Committee.
Yes, so we still have one more member left to add to our group, which is now Rowan, Charlotte, Peter, and I. We have more events than anything planned for the winter semester. Already confirmed the Valentine's Day event / free HIV testing for the first time at Loyola. And we're also going to partner with Rap Battles for Social Justice to do 3 workshops at Loyola, just because it's really important that we give Loyola the appropriate visibility. So I encourage you to join, just to demonstrate that even if most of you I know study downtown, it's super important that we make the effort to actually go to Loyola and do things at Loyola. So please join.
Great, thank you. So there's one spot open for the Loyola Committee if any counselor would like to nominate themselves. Yes, Jared? All right, do we have a second? Omar? Is there anyone else who'd like to nominate themselves to the Loyola Committee? All right, so if not, I'll give you a chance to motivate for yourself. So why would you like to sit on the Loyola Committee?
I actually currently live in Loyola, and I agree that I would enjoy to see a lot more Loyola activity. I really enjoy it there, and I feel like, I could, being that I live there, I'd be able to spend a lot of time there. I do study downtown, but being that I live in Loyola, that's where I spend a majority of my time. So I feel like I could really commit to this committee.
All right, thank you. Is there any discussion to be had before we move to a vote? Okay, so all those in favor of appointing Jared to the Loyola Committee, please raise your placards or your hands. 18, all those opposed? 0, and any abstentions? 0. So that carries. Congratulations, Jared, you're on the Loyola Committee. All right, so moving on is the Policy Committee, which has 2 seats, as Jeremy Laxer resigned from council since he's no longer a student this semester, and he wishes you all well. He sent me a nice email. So if anyone would like to sit, the chair of Policy Committee is Asma. There you are.
So the Policy Committee looks and maintains bylaws and standing regulations for the union. They also look at any policy that is referred to them to evaluate or to draft and brings it back. They also look at any referendum questions that are sent for fee levies. We have 2 members that have recently left, and we have capacity for 2 councillors to join. We meet at least 2 to 4 times a month when we're in operation. And there's an expectation that the meetings will last between 1 to 2 hours, if not more, if there's room for discussion. I would strongly encourage anyone who has time to commit to join us.
Great, thank you. So just a reminder, if we don't fill the committees, they'll just come back at every meeting until they're filled. So with that being said, is there anyone who'd like to nominate themselves to the Policy Committee? Policy Committee? Oh, sorry. Yes, so Sophie.
Yeah, I'd like to nominate myself.
Okay, do we have a second? Jared? Right. Is there anyone else who'd like to nominate themselves to the Policy Committee? There's still 1 seat open. Okay, so if there's no one else, I'll give you the chance to motivate for yourself. Sophie, why would you like to sit on Policy Committee?
Sure. I'd like to sit on Policy Committee because the bylaws and standing regulations are something that's always fascinated me about CSU politics. They were like one of the first things I looked into. I saw some raised eyebrows. I don't know if that was directly at the fact that policy interests me, but I study political science, so it's something that I'm super into. I think it would be great to work with the team, and I think I would have good skill sets. I can read a lot of paperwork, and I don't mind it, so bring it on.
All right, thank you. Is there any more discussion we had before we move to a vote? Okay, so in that case, all those in favor of Sophie being appointed to the Policy Committee, please raise your placards. 15, all those opposed? 0, and any abstentions? 1. All right, so that carries. Sophie, congratulations, you are on the Policy Committee, and there'll be 1 spot open for next meeting. With that, we can move on to Finance Committee. And Camden, welcome to Council.
Thank you. So for the Finance Committee, we don't meet regularly, but whenever there's a large expenditure to review, and we all get together and make sure that it fits within the CSU's mandate. So there's one seat empty right now, so if anyone's interested.
Thank you. So if anyone, yes, I'm so sorry, I forgot your name. Daniel. Daniel, all right. To nominate yourself?
Yes.
All right, do we have a second? Dylan? All right, is there anyone else who'd like to nominate themselves to the Finance Committee? Yes, Sophie?
I'd like to nominate myself.
Okay, Veronica second. Is there anyone else who'd like to nominate themselves to the Finance Committee? Okay, so at this point we have two councillors for one seat, so as standard we'll proceed to a vote, secret ballot vote after we do motivation. So Daniel, I'm so sorry. Why would you like to sit on the Finance Committee?
I would like to sit on the Finance Committee because I would like to be a part of the major expenditures that the CSU goes through. I would like to really get to know what we are spending our money on as students.
All right, thank you. And Sophie?
I've already expressed interest in finance. One of my first motions had to do with the CSU credit card. I've also been a finance coordinator for another student association, so I have some experience looking at budgets and understanding how finance and student politics money works. And I'm really interested in just being part of big expenditure decisions, seeing where our money's going, and making sure that people are held accountable for student money and student expenditures.
All right, thank you. So at this point I'll open the floor if anyone would like to motivate for either candidate, and then after that we'll pass to a vote. Yes, Rowan.
I would like to make something, like bring up a point to council in that one of the reasons I stepped down from this committee, because it's my seat that's up, is because of the gender, or lack of gender parity. As of right now, I believe there is one non-dude that sits on the committee, and 3 dudes.
Your members are Dylan, Rory, Ahmed.
There's a civilian.
4.
Oh, yes, sorry.
Student
sorry.
at large.
Student at large.
Yes.
Yeah. 4 dudes and 1 non-dude.
All right, everyone. Councillor speaking.
So I think, although that shouldn't be the only factor, that should be something that council considers when voting.
All right, thank you. Is there any more discussion or motivation before we move to a vote for either candidate? More discussion in general? All right, so if not, we are, oh, sorry, yeah, you're passing out little papers, so if you can write your candidate's name on them, and then we will tally up the votes. Yes, what's it?
I'm sorry, I was just busy with something. What are the names again?
Oh, sorry, your two candidates are Sophie and Daniel.
First privilege, actually, just to mention, doesn't want the picture taken so she knows.
Oh, sorry. Yes, I forgot to remind everyone. At the beginning of every council, sorry, I should remind you that the Concordian is taking pictures. So if anyone would not like to have their picture published, please raise your hand or placard. Okay. Thank you. Omar, can you pick up tiny papers if you're going around?
Yeah.
Thanks.
I'll just give it another minute.
Okay. We are in session currently, and there's still councillors voting, so if you can maintain the quorum, that would be excellent. Thank you very much. this point, with the ballots tallied and Corey as my witness, Sophie is appointed to the Finance Committee. Congratulations, Sophie. I will add your name to the council list, to the committee list. Okay, is there any more discussion to be had on the topic of Finance Committee? All right, so if not, we can move on to appointments, and Veronica, this is the committee you chair.
Yeah, so we have one seat open. We don't meet as often, but we essentially just appoint student at larges to different CSU committees. For example, we'll be appointing a senator very shortly. It's a fun committee. It's not, commitment-wise, it's not very, like, you don't need a lot of commitment for it. Yeah, please join.
Great, thank you. At this point, I'll open the floor to nominations if there's anyone who'd like to sit on the Appointments Committee. Yes, Jonathan?
I have to nominate myself.
Okay, do we have a second? Rowan? Okay, is there anyone else who'd like to sit on appointments? All right, so if there's nothing further, Jonathan, why would you like to sit on the Appointments Committee?
Because I like appointing people to things, because people deserve things. But for real, I sit on Senate, and as Veronica just mentioned, we're going to be appointing a new senator soon, so I would like to be involved in the process that chooses said individual who will be representing all of our students on Senate.
All right, thank you very much. Yes, Rory?
Do you mind if I ask the candidates questions?
Yeah, absolutely.
Other than, like, are you able to commit to more than just the meetings that will be required to appoint a senator?
Certainly. Do you have a direct? Yep. All right. Is there any more discussion or questions, motivations? All right, so if not, we can move to a vote. All those in favor of appointing Jonathan to the Appointments Committee, please raise your placards. 13, all those opposed? 0, and any abstentions? 1, 2. Perfect, so that carries, and congratulations, Jonathan, you were appointed to the Appointments Committee. All right, so at this point, we are on 6, that should be E, but it says F, sorry. AVEC committees, and I believe Ahmed usually speaks about these. Oh, yes, Asma?
So, Ahmed is actually at Loyola right now, so he's not able to make it. There's the mobilization committee that needs 1 seat for AVEC. And there is the accessible education and climate justice working groups that are looking for members. They're meet once a month by teleconference, and I mentioned the issues are accessible education, and the annual campaign this year is unpaid internships, and the climate justice stuff looks at pipeline and other aspects of the environment and climate justice issues. So if you're interested, you could just nominate yourself.
Right. So I believe every time I ask if anyone wants to nominate themselves to the AVEC committees, but it's the AVEC working groups, I think it is. Yes, Awatif?
I have a point of information.
Yes.
How many seats are there for each committee, please?
Yeah, that's right.
I've been told that there's 1 seat. No, sorry, there's 2 members that are being sought, sorry. But I've been told, well, this is what the notes I made were that there was 1 seat on the AVEC mobilization committee, and that on the working groups, there were 2 members being sought.
Okay, so 1 seat on the mobilization committee and 2 seats on working group. All right, thank you. Lori?
I'd like to nominate myself for the working group on accessibility and education.
All right, do we have a second? Awatif?
I don't have a second, but I just have a correction.
Sorry, was it a second though?
No.
Okay, do we have a second?
No,
Okay. Dylan? Okay, so I have a speakers list of Awatif and then Peter, yes.
Yes. Because I've worked with Ahmed on this before, and
I may have got it wrong. Yeah.
so the working committees are mobilization and accessibility, and each of these committees have 2 seats still open for counselors to sit on them.
All right,
So we still have 2 seats for each committee.
All right, so 2 seats on mobilization, 2 seats on accessibility. All right, perfect. And Rory, you had said mobilization, correct?
No, we're working on accessibility.
Oh, accessibility, sorry.
Accessibility and education.
There we go. All right. So that is currently on the table. Yes, Peter?
Yes, just want to say that I'm right now working on the climate justice. The meeting, just want to clear a few things because it's not that hard of a group. There's no document that really need to be reviewed beforehand. You just really need to like be at the meeting through online chat, and that's basically it. There's really like a few things that we have to do for this committee. So if you wanted to nominate yourself, that's great. Also, just want to make sure that there's a large number of people on this committee are francophone, so they will be speaking French as well. So just make sure on that, please.
All right, thank you. Okay, so at this point, there's one nomination for Rory to the Accessible Education Working Group. Does anyone else want to nominate themselves for either mobilization or accessible education? Thank you. All right, if not, yes, Rory?
Yeah, can I nominated myself, so it's not necessarily a motion, but can I nominate under condition that I get some further clarification on what the committee is? Because there's just some ambiguity as to specifically what the topic or subject matter of the committee itself is. So as of right now, I'd like to be part of it, but my understanding may change in future.
Can you, just so we don't have to go through all that, can anyone clarify the mandate of the committee? How is it?
Yeah, so their mobilization committee is kind of different of our mobilization committee. So what they do is that you're going to be part of a group that works on the campaign.
Oh, sorry, this is accessible education.
Oh,
Specifically the
I don't
accessible
know about that.
education.
Okay.
Actually, just bear with me, I might have some notes on that.
Do you have a clarification?
Yes.
I mean, you can nominate yourself under condition, or you can either appoint yourself and then resign, or we can just deal with it next meeting since there's 2 seats open and you're the only nominee, so I don't think anyone's gonna.
So I've got the description for it.
Yep.
So Accessible Education Working Group, participate in and strengthen coalitions, mobilizing against unpaid internships, identify and reach out to local and provincial partners for collaboration, work on supporting campaigns on tuition, deregulation, austerity, sexual violence, and mental health. So that's the mandate or scope for the Accessible Education Working Group.
Alright. Does that
Yep.
sound
Keep me honest.
perfect? David?
Try.
Oh,
But
Samuel.
It's okay.
No, Daniel, I'm sorry.
It's okay. I'd like to nominate myself to the Accessibility Committee.
Accessibility, okay. Do we have a second? Dylan? Alright. Is there anyone else who'd like to nominate themselves to either the Accessible Education or the Mobilization Committee? Yes, Rory?
Seeing as we now have a second person and I'm already on a bunch of committees, I'm going to recuse my nomination to allow for other people.
There's 2 seats open.
Yes, but
Okay.
I'm like seeing as there's other interest, I'm going to open up so that now someone else, if they want, could be part of that committee.
Alright, not a problem. Okay. Is there anyone else who'd like to nominate themselves to either the Accessible Education or the Mobilization Working Groups of AVEC? Yes.
Okay, actually, I want to nominate myself to the mobilization committee.
Okay.
But also, I have a point of information. I do know that AVEC is more francophone, so what are the limitations to someone that has basic French?
Peter, I think you've spoken
Yeah.
about before.
So I'm on that. Right now, what they did is they like because I don't speak French at all, so they basically translate for me right now. So it's okay if you don't really like speak French a lot. So it's fine. It's not a big thing. As long as you are able to make to the meeting, that's fine.
Would you like to nominate yourself?
Yeah.
Okay, do we have a second? Awatif? Alright, so we have 1 nomination for the Accessible Education and 1 for the Mobilization Working Group. Is there anyone else who'd like to nominate themselves to either? Alright, yes, Rowan?
I moved to Omnibus.
Okay, I'll give them a chance to motivate just because
sorry,
everyone else
my bad.
did. Alright, Daniel, why would you like to sit on the Accessible Education Working Group?
I would like to sit on the Accessible Education Working Group because I myself has actually been affected by mental health and would like to help out as much as I can.
Alright, thank you very much. Mustafa?
Okay, so for the mobilization committee, I'm already in the external committee of the Concordia Student Union, and I have a general interest in the mobilization that's happening in other student groups in Montreal. So I would like to further my experience in that, so I would appreciate being nominated for that.
Okay, thank you. So if there's no further discussion to be had, I'll just pretend, Rowan, you said your motion now to omnibus both of them. Do we have a second? Sophie, thank you very much. So if there's no further discussion, all those in favor of appointing Daniel to the Accessible Education Working Group and Mustafa to the Mobilization Working Group, please raise your placards. 18, all those opposed? 0, and any abstentions? 1. Perfect. So that carries, and congratulations on your nominations on your appointments to the EVIC committees. So with that, we can move on to 7F, which is CCSL. And Layla, I believe you or speak to this.
Yeah, so Veronica and I, as execs, both sit on CCSL, which is the Council on Student Life. Veronica sits on one of the subcommittees, so she could speak more detail to that. But it's basically a granting body. We fund a lot of student projects. It's chaired by the Dean of Students, and there's a lot of different members of the administration and faculty who are involved. It's a nice committee. You get to hear about really interesting initiatives that are taking place on campus, and you get to approve them. I would really recommend it. There are currently 3 spots for undergraduate students. I think it's a really great opportunity to get involved. It's a pretty low commitment. It's about once a month. It's always on Friday mornings. So that might eliminate you for schedule reasons, but it's always done. And if there are additional spots after council, it can go back onto student at large options. But currently, there have been 3 empty seats for undergraduate students all semester. So I highly encourage people to increase student representation.
All right, so if I understand correctly, 3 seats then? Okay, so Eamon and then Awatif.
Just a question, is it I have a seat on it, but is it possible for me to step down from that? I had to change my work schedule and I can't unchange it now.
I would notify the chair of that committee, but I think
If you let me, if you say I'm resigned, you're resigned. Okay. If we want to vote in for today, that's fine.
But also the chair of CCSL.
Yeah.
All right, so then we have 4 seats open. Awatif.
Yeah, I'd like to nominate Julia.
Okay, do you have her consent? All right. Okay, so we have 1 nomination for Julia. Okay, yes, Peter?
Just a question, clarification though, how often do you guys do we meet? Just want to
About once a month.
So there's 1 nomination currently. Would anyone else like to nominate themselves? Yes, Jonathan?
I'd like to nominate myself.
Okay, do we have a second? Michaela? All right. There's 2 seats left. If anyone, yes, Peter? To nominate yourself?
Yep.
Okay, do we have a second? Rory? Okay, so we have Peter, Julia, and Jonathan. If nobody nominates themselves for the 4th one, it'll come back at the next meeting. Okay, so if there are no further nominations, I'll let you all have the chance to motivate for yourselves. Did Julia send you anything?
But I can speak for her.
Okay.
So Julia said that she now has a lot of time for the next semester, and she would really love to sit on this committee, given that she herself has received a lot of funding from this committee for her projects in the past 3 years, so she knows a lot about the funding process for CCSL and how to access other funding, so she really would love to contribute to this committee and help those people that are applying for funding. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Jonathan?
I mostly just really like to get involved in the process of funding student initiatives and making sure that that money properly goes to the student initiatives that need it and want it, so that lots of cool things can happen on campus.
Thank you. And Peter, why would you like to sit on CCSL?
So I've been doing all those kind of project funding for the past years and then past semester. So it would be good for me to know all those new initiatives that happen on school, and I'm also someone that has done new initiative before, so just wanted to have a try.
Alright, thank you. So if there's nothing further, we can, if someone wants to move to omnibus appoint, yes, Sawatif? Okay, do we have a second? Jared? Alright, so all those in favor of appointing Julia, Jonathan, and Peter to CCSL, please raise your placards. 16, all those opposed? 0, and any abstentions? 1, 2, 3. Perfect, so that carries. Congratulations to your appointments to the Concordia Council on Student Life. So if there's nothing further in appointments, we can move on to returning business. Would council prefer to take a recess since I see that the food has arrived, or prefer to keep going? Yes, Omar?
I'd like to motivate for a recess.
Okay, I just wanted to get the floor. Is everyone okay with that? All right, perfect. Okay, so we'll take a 15-minute recess and reconvene in 15 minutes. Oh, yes?
I just wanted to explain the food. So, for student unions, doing research into living wages and what that amounts to in Montreal as well as in the country. And this is just to inform council that's a project that I'm undertaking that I would really love to have councillor input on. I think it's something to be discussed. I don't think there's necessarily like I just think there are many ways that we could approach it, and the executives have met and talked also about how there are other ways in which there are perhaps things that would make more sense to incorporate into executive benefits, such as like a Metro Pass rather than increasing our wage, or things like that that would just make it, anyway. It's all a discussion to be had, and I just think it's one that isn't necessarily conducive at council alone. So I'm bringing this up to inform everyone that I'll be posting all of the resources that I've been using in my research onto the council Facebook page, and putting up a when to meet so that councillors can give their availability if they're interested in participating in the discussion, so that it can be a little more in-depth and not just a case of the executive bringing something forward to council where if people have questions, if people want to look into the research, there's not necessarily the time or the space to do so. I'm also available if folks want to talk about it with me outside of that particular space, or if you have any thoughts or resources you want to share. And I will be posting all of that in a Google Doc or like a Google Drive folder tomorrow for everyone to peruse at your leisure.
All right, thank you. Is there any discussion to be had on living wage? Yes, Marco?
Question, when was the last wage increase? When did that occur?
So each year, from my understanding, the executive salary is increased by a very small percentage to account for inflation. Right. But as far as a salary increase, several years. The past finance coordinator was going to give me more years back than I already had, but I'll have to check in with the new finance coordinator for that.
Okay, thank you. What's it? Oh, sorry. Okay, so if there's nothing for, yes, Daniel?
What is the current salary of the CSU executive?
Minimum wage.
Minimum.
It's in the standing regulation that it's actually aligned against the power and fund.
Thank you.
Okay. Does anyone else have any more questions or discussion on living wage before we move on? All right, so that being said, we can move on to 7B, which is Election Reform Ad Hoc Committee. And Michaela, this is yours.
Yeah, so we had our first meeting today, and currently we talked about we discussed our concerns with the elections currently, and what we would like to accomplish short-term and long-term. Hopefully the CEO will be coming to our next meeting to make some recommendations and talk to us and for us to share our ideas. He emailed me and said that he's going to look at the times when he's available, so that's really great. And yeah, so more people are welcome to join. I would just ask that you try to make it a commitment to come so that we can actually have a fairly productive meeting so that we're not always catching up with people on what's been happening. And if anyone wants links to like the Google Drive, let me know. If you want to get involved, let me know. Things we talked about, Caitlin put in the meeting minutes as the last email that should have been sent out. And we basically talked about turnout, the CEO in general, and how there's like a huge turnover rate and how we have to have more institutional memory. And we really go into depth to look at the minutes and short-term goals of nomination periods, some standing regs that we're going to be changing for this coming general election. So yeah.
All right, thank you. Okay, does anyone have any questions or discussion regarding the, sorry, what was it, election ad hoc committee? Okay, so if that's all good, we can move on to 8A, which is interim finance coordinator pay. And Layla, the floor is yours.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I completely forgot this was coming up, so I need to pull up the motion again. Or if anyone has it on, I'm really sorry. Is it on hand? Could you just have it in Slack for me? Sorry. Whereas each executive position at the CSU is expected to work full-time, whereas following the resignation of the previous finance coordinator, Suleiman El-Alawi, Veronica Rozeski became interim finance coordinator and assumed all duties under this role in addition to her regular tasks as internal coordinator. Whereas Veronica Rozeski is effectively working 2 jobs and maintaining 2 separate portfolios, be it resolved that Veronica Rozeski be paid an honorarium of $300 for every week of work as the interim finance coordinator, for a total of $900 as of December 13th.
All right, thank you. Do we have a second? Jared, okay, your motion.
So I wrote this for the previous council meeting, but it's still accurate, and seeing as we appointed a finance coordinator who started immediately after that, the extent of her role goes until then. But I witnessed firsthand Veronica take on a whole other portfolio, and yes, there are some aspects that she was able to put on hold, but a large majority of them meant juggling 2 full-time jobs. Especially when finance is a job that requires consistency and for checks to continue to go out, etc. I think that it's important to recognize that she took on that workload, and a much larger amount of time was spent in the office, and I think it's appropriate to pay her for that time.
All right, thank you. Is there any discussion to be had on the motion? Dylan?
Yeah, how is the number calculated?
Each executive makes around just over $850 every 2 weeks. So just over $400 every week. So I rounded down a little bit because obviously there are some things that cross over, but I felt like that was an appropriate amount to reflect how much of the work crossed over versus the fact that realistically she wasn't in the office for 8 hours a week.
All right, thank you. Is there any more discussion or questions regarding the motion? Yes, Dylan?
What happened last year when the person stepped down and someone else took the spot? Was they paid the additional amount throughout the whole year?
If I'm not mistaken, somebody was appointed very soon after. I don't think anyone officially filled the role. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah, there was no motion made to have anyone. Sorry?
Rachel took on the task.
Okay, if anyone can clarify anything about the pay situation, I don't remember it coming to council. Yeah, Rowan?
What I remember, there was no motion, but I also believe that, like, there was very quickly, I believe the resignation happened either the day of or the day before a council meeting, and by the next week we'd appointed a permanent person for the position. But I don't think there was ever a motion that I can remember.
So that's what happened last year. Okay, is there any more discussion or questions regarding the motion? Just to make sure everyone's clear. All right, so if not, we can move to a vote. So all those in favor, please raise your placards. 18, all those opposed? 0, and any abstentions? 1. All right, so that carries. Is there any more discussion on the agenda point of interim finance coordinator pay? Alright, so now we can move on to internal and clubs report, and I would say the floor is yours.
Yes. I pulled out this report because I had a few questions to the executive, and during the break I had a discussion with the executive about them, and they seem to be solved. So motion straight to approve her report since my questions have been answered.
Okay, do a second, Rowan. I'll count the first part as your motivation. Is there any discussion we had on approving the report? This is from last meeting. All right, so all those in favor, please raise your placards. All those opposed? 0, and any abstentions? 0. All right. So that. Oh, sorry. My apologies. Didn't see you there. 1 abstention. Okay. So that concludes internal and clubs report. Okay. So if there's nothing further, we can move on to new business substantive and 2-round voting. Ali, the floor is yours.
Whereas no electoral system is mandated on council choosing a candidate to fill a vacant executive seat, whereas a vacant executive seat might have more than 2 competing candidates, whereas a first past the post system, electoral system can vote in candidates with simple majorities. Simple majority is a majority in which the highest number of votes cast for any one candidate exceeds the second highest number, while not constituting an absolute majority of 50% plus 1. Whereas an absolute majority of more than 50% is required to vote in a new executive, whereas a 2-round system eliminates all candidates but the 2 with the highest number of votes for a second round, whereas a 2-round system ensures that the candidate chosen has an absolute majority of the votes. Be it resolved that council use a 2-round system when voting on vacant executive positions.
All right, thank you. Do we have a second? Jonathan and Ellie, your motivation.
So basically, last time when we were choosing an executive, it took us a very, very long time, and it is also better to have a system like this in which we'd make sure that we would have most of council choose an executive, like more than 50% of council choose an executive. So I think putting that system in place in comparison to any other system in this situation is the best alternative.
All right, thank you. Okay, so I have a speakers list of Rowan, Dylan, Reem, and Khadija. Rowan?
I agree with some parts of the motion. Like I like the 2-round system. I was one of the people who was advocating it last time, but I am hesitant with this motion just because I think the bylaws are purposefully broad in how to appoint vacant executive positions, and I am open to discussion of changing that, but I think it should be a larger discussion. I think if it's going to be done, then there needs to be work done, not just on the not just a motion, but on the standing regulations, on the potentially the bylaws as well. So I like the style of voting. Whether or not I like adopting it in this form, not so much, personally. And I think it bears some flaws.
Thank you. Dylan?
Motion to refer this to policy committee to provide a recommendation.
All right, here's a second. I would do. Okay, so there's a new motion on the table to refer the matter to policy committee. Is there any discussion? Yes, Rory?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think if someone has put the work into preparing a motion for council, and they, took the initiative to do so, and they specifically chose not to bring it to a committee first, that it was, in their mind, ready enough to bring it to council, that we should garner them with the respect to discuss it, at least for a little bit longer than just referring it straight to committee. It's also respect to the committee itself that already has a lot of things to work on, that if this is something that we can quickly and succinctly express our opinions on right now, that we should do so before sending it to a committee that may not work on it because they have other things to do for a long time. So with that being said, I would suggest that we not refer this to committee. It's not late. We don't have a full agenda today. At the very least, I'd like to have 10 minutes of discussion if people want to say things about this. So at least then, if we refer it to committee later, the committee members can have heard what council's views are. Thank you.
Thank you. Alicia?
Yeah, I hear the concerns of Rory, and I agree that discussions should be done when we're looking at motions. But this one specifically, I personally don't know how this system functions properly, like to the fullest, and by referring it to policy committee is not only going to create a policy to it, but is also going to research it, whether the committee is going to do it or the chair of the committee going to find other ways to bring us back research about how this system, this voting system would be applied and what are the procedures. That's what I'd like to see. We can discuss it, but I don't have the information about this voting system. I don't know 100% how this voting system works and whether there are other voting systems that are better that we can use. So I wouldn't know how I would be able to engage in this discussion that Councillor Rory would want to have. So I would appreciate that this goes to policy committee.
Thank you. Dylan?
One of the reasons why I motioned to put it to policy is, as Rowan said earlier, that there is places in our bylaws, there's places in our standing regulations that could perhaps contradict themselves with this implementation. So just how does it fit? I think that also a policy committee is very well equipped. They'd be able to do the research to see what would be the best system, perhaps what other universities do in these situations, as well as what systems are best, because with the elimination of two possible candidates, there's always the debate of, well, should there be a tiered voting system? Would that be more democratic? Because people, in the case of having 5 or 6 candidates, a person who has majority might simply have 3 votes, and it could change. So I think policy committee is well equipped to discuss these matters and come up with a formal recommendation, but I do commend the amount of work that was done in this resolution, and I thank you for bringing it forward.
Thank you. Rory?
I don't mean to be a proverbial stick in the mud here, but something else that I want to say is part of our jobs as councillors is when we get this email with the agenda and we see that this topic is on the agenda and we see the documents that are sent out, our job is to read them, to prepare for them, and to say, okay, this topic's coming up on the agenda at next council. Let me think about what I think about it. If I'm not informed right now, I can either make myself informed or I can not vote or not involve myself in the discussion. That's up to me. It's your prerogative. But I feel like we should stop deferring things for other people to discuss. If it's been brought forward to the table, we should be prepared to discuss it. If we're not prepared to discuss it, then go to the person that submitted it and say, hey, can we bring this to committee first? Can we talk about it outside of council? Like, there's nothing stopping us from going to the person that submitted a motion the day before council, 2 days before, whenever, and saying, hey, why did you submit this? Can I ask you about it? What do you mean for it? I'm not saying anyone hasn't done their jobs, but I'm just saying we should be mindful that that is part of our expected duties. My other point is that this is something very important if we're talking about changing how we vote in people and our voting systems in general. This is something that I think all of council should have to agree on, should at the very least have a discussion and agreement on. Rather than having a few people in committee sort of discuss pros and cons, explain the differences, and then make a decision or make a recommendation. I understand the policy committee can bring it back to council and say, here's what we think, you should do this. Everyone just, raise your placard, say yay. But I think that this is something that it's everyone's job to think about, to discuss, and to vote on together, because it will affect this group, this organization, moving forward long term. So I think the most people involved in that decision, at very least a brief discussion about it, is essential.
Thank you. How was it?
Yeah. I am not comfortable working or discussing this motion without a research done and submitted to council about this particular voting system. I'm not going to spend hours on the web trying to find information about this voting system and trying to find information about other voting system and then comparing them myself and then going to ask, which is going to take me a long time. So what we're asking here is that a research and a proposal would be made by a committee to the rest of council, which will make their life easier. Please.
Thank you. Michaela?
Yeah, I think what Elise brought forward is really important, and it's something that we faced
and kind of had a bit of conflict, or it took a long time to figure out. And so something needs to be in place where we have like a very, we have consensus overall who wants one position, especially when it's executive. But that said, I think maybe we should be a bit more thorough about this and see how it is interacting with other standing regulations. And I think even if we bring this to policy, it will come back and we will have a discussion again. It's not just one vote, it's the same thing as what's happening right now. And discussion is really important here too. But I think we should just look at the bigger picture of what this is affecting. This was an issue that happened. Are there other places where this is also an issue? Yeah, so I think we should bring it to policy and continue the great work that Ellie's done.
Okay, thank you. Yes, great.
I would just suggest that, you guys have raised very good points. If you don't think that council has the information in front of them to make a decision, and you don't think that the majority of council is versed in the topic enough to make this decision without further consultation, then that's fine. I would then request that we just send it back to the person that submitted it and say, okay, you're bringing a motion forward to council to change something. As a councillor, that's your right. You're proposing that we do something differently. You're proposing one method, you're proposing one solution. Council doesn't know about the other solutions. Can you go back and maybe have a presentation? Can you create a little bit more of a proposal, an expose of what the options are, and then say, here's why I believe this is the best option. Instead of just submitting a motion, can you come forward with some sort of motivation for it? That just simplifies matters. That's all of our jobs as councillors, if we want to bring something forward, to do the work, to do the research ourselves, if this is what we believe in. And it's just a lot more efficient to have that one person who said, you know what, this is what I want to change, to ask them if they can go back and just give us a little bit more. Ask them to provide us with the tools to make this decision that they want us to make. Sending it to policy is I think it's just an overly bureaucratic excuse not to discuss it. And I think that it's going to be better suited to have a proper proposal and investigation at council.
Thank you. How is it?
Yeah, I agree that the person who submitted this motion needs to be engaged in the research that would be done on the motion, and I still want policy committee to go through it because policy committee has been going through the standing regulations and knows them really well. And I would suggest that the one who wrote it, which is Ali, to come to the policy committee whenever this point or this motion would be discussed or researched, and his input there will be a space for his input to be put there. But I think help needs to be given from policy committee, given that they've been going through these stuff for the rest of from the beginning of the year.
Thank you. Ron?
I think this conversation has kind of shifted in a weird way from where I was talking about lack of knowledge about bylaws and the standing regulations and what we currently have in place, to suddenly discussing research documents on different electoral formats. And I'm always one to argue for the most information possible, but I think this is kind of shifting the discussion in a way that isn't necessarily where it needs to be. I mean, I don't think we need to get into super complicated voting formats, especially since this isn't any sort of actual major election. This is an appointment. This is a vote from a board of directors. My main issue with this motion was simply that it's the way that we have appointed executives last year, maybe it's the year before, I wasn't around, but I know at least last year it made a shift away from what has been regularly done, where normally it would literally be the general coordinator before the president would just pick someone and say this is the finance coordinator now, and then council could either ratify or not. Over the last couple of years, this has been shifted to bringing in people for interviews and allowing council to decide themselves. And because of that, there's kind of a discrepancy in how we're actually doing things to the bylaws. So I think Ali brought up a very important discussion where there's not really this isn't all clear. We're kind of shifting, but the bylaws and the regulations are all still stuck in the past. But I don't think we need to necessarily implement this very detailed and specific format for how to appoint someone. And I don't think making sure to strip all conversation of that appointment process of how we're going to do it is even necessary. I think having broad rules that reflect what we're actually doing, so maybe like small changes to the bylaws while still keeping it broad to suggest that council plays a more active role in the process, which is what we're currently doing, which is how we've done things the last couple of years now, would be more appropriate than making specific regulations for how we're doing it. And then at the time, let's say next year, executive position becomes empty again for whatever reason, next year, council can sit there and be like, okay, we know this is where we stand, now let's figure out the details. And sometimes it's gonna take a bit longer than it normally should, which last time definitely happened. But like, that's the cost of not over-specifying things and not having bylaws that like dictate to the letter actions sometimes.
Peter?
Yes, so I have the feeling with run two is just the discussion kind of tends into a weird way. Also, just want to say that like not everyone will be okay like with doing the research, which is also the reason that I was hoping that it would be good if we can give to the policy committee, because this is the whole like committee's job. So it's better if they can like research all together and then bring it back to the council so we have a clear idea of what the system works.
Thank you. Reem? Okay. Mustafa?
Oh, I'm here. Okay, so whoops. Okay, so I guess Rowan said most of the thing. Like, I want to point out that the conversation kind of swayed away. But I feel like we should, as councillors, recommend things to the policy committee rather than give it all to them and give them the full, like, opinion and suggestions on what the next step should be. As Rowan said, it's a small, it's such a small procedure voting in any executive. So we shouldn't get into a lot of details, but also as councillors, we're responsible because we're the ones that are gonna vote for executives, whether it's us or next year's. So it's kind of like our own, system that we prefer to follow. So I guess that we should have a voice or like a discussion on what system we and any next council is going to follow. So yeah, I guess it's just suggestions to the policy committee rather than giving them 100% analysis of the issue. That's it.
Thank you. Daniel? Okay, Ali?
I didn't want to really speak, and I just wanted to stay until the end just to understand what people were thinking and what they wanted out of this. Just a few things to say. Obviously, I did a lot of research, and not just research in regards to this, but this is kind of what I studied as a poli-sci major. And in regards to explaining what the two-round system is and what I am trying to accomplish through this, which is making sure that anyone that is chosen must have at least 50% plus one of council's consent. Obviously, this is because last time we had a discussion, there was a lot of discussion around choosing people with the highest amount of votes without them necessarily having a 50% or above, which I find extremely dangerous and unfair and undemocratic. In addition to that, those two systems that were provided are considered the, let me choose this word right. Okay, there are two types of electoral systems. There's the list systems, which is not the one that we're going to use inside council because it doesn't make any sense to use that, especially if it's one seat. And so the other system we can choose is either the first past the post or the two-round system. The other systems don't work for this kind of like the two like the only FTPT, first past the post, and this two-round system work for this council and what we're trying to choose. And basically, by choosing the two-round system, it doesn't mean that we have to have a two-round system, but rather if we have more than 2 people, that we have to use the two-round system to ensure that there's a 50% or more. And I think I explained that within the whereases of the motion, just to make sure that people understand what we're doing, and I'm not just throwing just a word on them without them understanding. Now, in regards to the other part, which is giving this to policy, I don't necessarily, I'm not really with that. The reason why I'm not with that is because, 1, they have a lot of things to do. 2, this is something that we are missing in our bylaws. This is something that is really, really important and that must be done. This is not about us choosing this upon other councils, like council members in the future. This is just creating a system that would actually benefit everyone. Obviously, time is a big part of it, but the other part and most important part is having a democratic election in which more than 50% of councillors agree on one member. And this is only about executive vacant seats. This is not about anything else. This is directed specifically for one thing. And so this is why I worked on this, and I thought that it was a very important thing to have.
Great, thank you. Dylan?
Call to order.
Call to question?
Yeah, call to question.
There's no one on the speakers list. So if nobody else wishes to speak, we can move directly to a vote. So the motion on the table is to refer the matter to Policy Committee. So all those in favor, please raise your placards. 6. All those opposed? 12, and all those abstaining. 1, 2. All right, so the motion fails. We're back on the main speakers list, which is Reem, Khadija, and Awatif. And I'll add Rory and Dylan at the end. Reem. Okay, Khadija? Okay, Awatif? Okay, that's easy. Rory?
I move to table this to next council meeting. And I open up the floor to some amendments to maybe put some conditions on that for further review.
Okay, do we have a second? Your motivation?
That's a motion plus a suggestion, which is just that, like, let's do building blocks here. 1, let's table it till later. 2, let's all agree on, like, is there gonna be revision? Who's gonna do it? When it's gonna be done? What it's gonna include? Whether we want it or not, etc. The extent of it, blah, blah, blah. Add those bits on there as amendments. Let's get this done and go home.
Great. So at this point, the floor is open. Yes, Layla?
I really agree with the point that Rory made earlier about receiving council documents, and if you have questions, approaching people before the meeting, because it is a really hard space to get more information. That being said, I think now is a really great time that if there's more information that would help you make a decision, it would be a great time to voice it to Ali, in order for if it's to come back, for him to be able to provide that information, or for that to be clarified in some way.
Okay, thank you. Dylan?
I would say that I'd like to see the ability of maybe a ranking choice voting system being put into place, and that consistency is very important. We have individuals who said that this system, 50% plus 1, is the only way of having pure democratic elections. And yet, it's not the system that we're doing in our regular elections. If we're going to stand by certain voting systems for the sake of democracy and say that this is really our only ways of getting the system of choice, then we have to take that into consideration and perhaps apply it to other voting systems and our other election processes as well.
Thank you. Just a reminder, the motion on the table is to table the motion. So discussing electoral systems, we can always table it and then have a discussion in general, and those things can be taken into account for the next meeting. But just so we don't get on the topic of arguing this system versus that system when that's not the motion on the table currently. Rory?
Yeah, so just for those who maybe haven't noticed, while we've been having this discussion which is what, like 4 or 5 minutes long. I've been finding the exact parts from Wikipedia from the voting systems page that explain precisely what Ellie's proposal is and why it's good, why it's not, you know, what it means. It's under a different term. Right now I'm putting up some other lists to some great resources where even in a visual medium, the different voting systems can be explained. So I would just suggest that, like, it's really easy. While we have this discussion, I can pull up all these great resources right in front of me. Let's just all go home, all just like mutually agree that we're gonna just check it out. You don't need to read what I've put up there, but read something, check it out, and come back with some opinions on voting systems. I mean, like, as a business student, this is fascinating, right? I don't study this on a day-to-day basis. I have in the past, but like some of us may never study this, right? Maybe as an art major, you'll never talk about different voting systems. This is a cool opportunity as a CSU counselor to be involved in governance. So this is really interesting. So take the time to do some research, inform yourself, and let's come back and you know, discuss it properly next time.
Thank you. Sophie? Yeah, I was actually just going to point out that Rory had posted a bunch of links. So that's, and that right now we should just be discussing whether to table it for next time and agree, as Rory said, to like look at the links, do our own research, and come back. Because as counselors, it's our job to read the documents that are sent out to us, and I think that it's really important to just reiterate that. Do your research, do your job. All right, thank you. Ali?
I'm going to come back to one of the comments in regards to the best electoral system. The reason why we don't have a 2-round system or any other system at CSU elections is because of the cost. To have a 2-round system on a university level costs a lot of money. So that's pretty much why.
Thank you. Jared?
All I was going to say is I think that we should table this for now because as some of the counselors have mentioned, many of us have never dealt with this before. So, you know, this gives us 2 weeks to even just quickly look up not just the 2-round voting system and first past the post, but perhaps many different systems. The Wikipedia page shows many of the different ways we can vote so that we can kind of have an idea as what we personally think is the most democratic, is the best, so that when we come in 2 weeks, we know where we stand, rather than having some people who aren't too sure, you know, because this is, you know, if we're making a decision as to how we should vote, I think it's important that when we vote for how we vote, we know what that means.
All right, thank you. Peter?
Yes, so just for clarification with Alizo, in your document you said whereas the candidates exceed the second highest number will not consist of absolute majority of 50+1. Aren't we supposed to, like, because as I know that we're supposed to be at least above the majority of vote already, so I'm not sure why you're saying like 50+1, because I think we are already like have to be above the majority in order for the thing to be passed. So I'm not sure why you're saying that.
Thank you. Dylan?
Call the question.
Okay. Oh, sorry. Did you? Oh, sorry. I wasn't sure that was a question.
Yeah,
okay.
no.
I'll let Ali answer the question.
So
sorry.
the reason is last time when we were having debate, there was discussion about choosing the one with the highest votes. So let's say you have 3 people, one of them gets the highest votes but is still under 50%, and that person will be chosen. And that's how the first past the post system is exactly. And I find that extremely dangerous and undemocratic. That's the reason why I brought up this, because it's another way of doing it that makes sure that you have a 50% or more. That's it.
Did you have a follow-up question?
Yeah, but what if let's say like the three people who vote, none of them have the 50+1 though? Like, then what will happen then? Because if in your case right now it seems like it has to have someone with 50+1, but what if none of the 3 who gets the 50+1, and then, like, are you just saying like they're just not going to be passed, but then but then we still have a highest one. So
Do you want to just clarify?
This is a knockout system. So basically, if you have 3 people, the 2 people with the highest votes go against another each other because it's a 2-round system. The second round will basically between 2 people, so you'd actually need to have a 50% or more to choose someone.
All right, thank you. At this point, there is no one else on the speakers list, Dylan. So if no, oh, okay. So in that case, you would ask for a call to question. Do we have a second? Rowan, thank you. All those in favor of calling the question, please raise your placards. All those opposed? And any abstentions? Nope. All right, perfect. So in that case, the question's been called, and the motion on the floor is to table this until next meeting. So all those in favor, please raise your placards. 17. All those opposed? 1, 2, and any abstentions? Was that an opposition or abstention? Abstention. Okay. 1, 2. Okay. So 2 abstentions and 2 oppositions. So the motion carries, and this will come back. Yes.
When you asked Eamon whether it was an abstention or opposition,
He said abstention.
yes. But
no, for me was like post.
Yeah, opposed. Yeah. So there were 2 oppositions and 2 abstentions. Don't worry, I counted the opposed. All right. At this point, we're back on the main speakers list, which is Dylan.
Iverson.
Okay. Layla.
I just want to highlight this one last time that for this, what we just did to be effective, you should let Ali know or do your own research what needs to be included next time. And in like the most non-judgmental way I possibly can, I really encourage everyone to read council documents early so that if there are questions like this that can be addressed beforehand and that information can be given so that we can be in the room with the most information possible. It's a really effective way to have these meetings be able to come all at once and make a decision in the room with everyone feeling like they have the information they need to make that decision at the time.
Thank you. And on that note, I'll make a reminder to everyone to send me their documents early. Thank you. Okay, so is there any more discussion we had on the matter of 2-round voting system? All right, so it'll come back next meeting. So with that, we can move on to new business informational and retreat. Omar, the floor is yours.
So I think there are still a lot of unanswered questions. After I do give out this information, I'll make it available by tonight so everyone can refer to it tomorrow and the day after to prepare for the retreat. So just very quickly, there's 4 things: the location, the transportation, the food, and the programming, and the activities that will be taking place at the retreat. So just a quick schedule. We'll leave here from the H building behind in the parking, just behind Reggie's actually. The 3 executives are driving, 4 executives are driving. We all have a minivan because that is a cheaper alternative to getting a bus there and back. Other than that, so I'll put up in the document that I've created so far in Google Sheets who's going in which car, even if the people are coming on Saturday, because for example Ahmed is driving up on Saturday and we'll be able to accommodate people for that. So all the transportation will be done based on the needs that have been specified by each individual attending. There are only 3 people that haven't confirmed if they're attending or not, to which I will reach out to shortly. So we'll leave here at 6 p.m. We should all be there by 8. If you are with someone who will be, if you're going to be someone who needs to go a little bit later than 6, just let whoever's driving you or whoever's car you are in know, and they will most likely be okay to wait. We'll arrive there at 8, have dinner, and for the night we'll do a few icebreakers, play some games, board games, do some activities, and be able to go skating for those that have skates. Keep in mind that at the chalet location we could rent tubes and snowshoes, but not skates, so you'll have to bring your own. On Saturday, once we wake up, we'll have breakfast for the pancakes, so we'll have the food menu extensively ready for tonight as well. But then we'll be doing a lot of outdoor activities, like I said, tubing, snowshoeing, skating, and then we'll come in for lunch, dinner, do some more activities, and at night watch a movie. We'll be bringing projectors, so if anyone has movies or has any suggestions for which ones to watch, you can let us know. Sunday after breakfast, we will slowly prepare and head back to Montreal for an ETA of about 12 to 1 p.m.
Great, thank you. Yes, Layla?
Just for maybe simplicity's sake, maybe it's easier to say we're going to leave at 6, but if you can't, to let Omar know so that we can coordinate all the people who want to leave later in the same vehicle rather than having like several vehicles wait for a group of people who may just want to leave later. So if you can't leave town until after 6, let us know. If not, the expectation is that we're leaving at 6.
Okay, thank you. Omar?
Thank you, great suggestion. And then on that note, I would also put up a small list or a short list of things that you should bring. You don't need bedding or sheets as that is provided. You just need to bring some warm clothes, especially because we'll be doing quite a few activities outside, and anything else that you would like, be it games that you want to play for yourself, or food, snacks, drinks that you would like to consume as well. So that's all for the retreat.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions or discussion? Yeah, Jared?
Will we have any Wi-Fi provided in the event that we need it?
There's no Wi-Fi there.
Okay.
All right. Is there, yes, Rory?
I would just ask, during the times that you guys are doing a lot of the physical outside activities, have options been made available so that it's inclusive for people that either aren't able to go outside, don't want to go outside, I do know of people that, like, say, are allergic to cold. I didn't believe it, but like they get hives when it's too cold, etc. So there's some people that may not want to go outside, aren't able to go outside, don't have the clothes for it, or people that aren't able to do the physical activities. So I would just ask that everyone keep that in mind, when you're all running around skating.
Plan prayer time for whoever wants to stay inside and stay warm to do so. And just as a general note, everything about the retreat is supposed to be enjoyable and fun. So if there's something that you need to let us know in order for it to be fun or enjoyable or safe for you, please let us know. And if there are activities that you don't want to take part in or anything you don't want to do, of course, you don't have to by any means. This is supposed to be for your enjoyment. So please enjoy it, or let us know how we can help you enjoy it.
All right, thank you. Asma?
Yeah, I have been called out asking if there's any food allergies, but if anyone hasn't submitted that, please make sure that information is shared with Omar, so that all those arrangements could be made. It'll be a bit difficult after, to get there.
Is there anything else, discussions, questions regarding the retreat? Sorry, I see someone in the back. Yes, Khadija?
I wonder what time the crew on Saturday is leaving. On Saturday.
Sorry, the what's leaving?
The crew on Saturday.
Oh,
That will be based off of Saturday leavies avaiilabilities, but whoever, because Ahmed will be driving up along with Asma, so you'll be able to, we'll coordinate that side with everyone who's leaving so that it works for them.
All right, thank you. Is there anything else? Discussion, questions? Yes, Eamon?
Is there anybody that's, I maybe misunderstood that question. Are there people going up on Saturday? Is that what that was? Okay, I apparently didn't understand the word leave because it's been a long day.
Oh, I said leavies, which is not a real word, so.
Okay, I get it now.
All right. Okay, so if there's anything else, Omar and Layla are your point people? Perfect. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask them and they will be able to provide answers. Okay, so if there's nothing further to discuss now, we can move on to question period and business arising. Yes, Layla?
I'm hoping that council is okay with a bit of a lenient understanding of business arising. This came up today and unfortunately wasn't at council early enough to add it to the agenda, but it's related. So as some of you may know, there were allegations made against members of Concordia's English department around sexual abuse and sexual misconduct or predatory behavior. Obviously, this is really upsetting news. Today, the executive wrote a statement about this, and I was hoping that I could read it to council because in respecting the motion that the CSU not sign on to anything without checking in with council, but also with the desire to make a statement as soon as possible, we signed off on it as the CSU executives. But what I would like to do is read it, and if council is on board, for council to sign on to it so that we can make this available not just as 8 people, but as a bunch of people who represent many students. So I'm just gonna, or I can post the letter on the Facebook, or I can read it.
Can you post it as well?
Yeah. Yeah.
Did you have a question, Rory?
Yeah, I have a question. I'm just wondering, we're going to bring this up at Senate next Friday as well?
Absolutely.
Great.
Okay. I'll just read it, but for those of you who want to follow along, it's in the Facebook group. The CSU is extremely disappointed to have learned about the allegations of abuse and sexual misconduct that have been reported through multiple news outlets and blog posts regarding Concordia's English department. To begin, it is absolutely essential to say that we believe survivors. Given the context of the last few months in regards to allegations of sexual violence, it comes as no surprise that perpetrators exist within our own communities. It's important that the university, the administration, and the named individuals and departments are held accountable. Today, Alan Shepard stated that the environment that we have in our university and departments is safe. Clearly, this is not the case. It's vital that this be acknowledged and that this case be thoroughly investigated. Now is not the time to pretend that these sorts of behaviors have not existed and been fostered in academic settings. It's time to address them and commit to the work that is necessary in order to create better, safer learning environments, as well as better ways to hold people accountable. It's important to consider the perspective from which these allegations emerge, one of having witnessed, but also of feeling a degree of complicity through maintained silence. This is not the first allegation in our community, and it won't be the last. It's important to be conscious of what is kept in the dark by silence and complicity, and to push back against the overwhelming amount of harassment and sexual violence that coats our societies, our spaces, and our communities. Academia is no exception. Actions are vital, and the CSU is committed to advocating and supporting students. This year, the CSU signed on to our turn in a continued effort to push for better sexual violence policies on campus. Members of our executive team attended the reading of Bill 151, an act to prevent and fight sexual violence in higher education institutions in Quebec City, and have worked in collaboration with EVEC and our turn to see necessary amendments made to this bill to make this bill more effective. We are here to represent and support students. We encourage students to seek out the support they may need through resources below or to add more. And these remain available to any and all students who want to engage in these, and we remain available to any and all students who want to engage in these discussions. Sincerely, the CSU executive team. And I posted resources to the Sexual Assault Resource Center at Concordia, the Center for Gender Advocacy, who offers peer support and has additionally offered anonymous reporting through email. Our turn, which as councillors may remember, we signed on to, as well as phone numbers for 2 different hotlines for assault.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone who has any questions or discussion points on the issue? Rory?
Yeah, it was something that I just sort of spoke briefly with Asma about a couple minutes ago, but as I was driving in, I heard Alan Shepard on CBC with his response statement, and he'd said something about investigating campus-wide and all the other faculties, etc. And I just think it's interesting because we had a presentation by Marcus Peters, if I'm correct, a couple months ago with the results of his undergraduate survey that the CSU did. And the statistics that I like to bring up every time you guys hear me talk about this stuff is the discrimination on campus, sexual, ableism, sexism, racism, etc., is predominantly, it's an overwhelming majority is experienced in the academic setting. So what was reported to the CSU in their research was that the majority of it was experienced in the academic spheres. So not student groups, not campus services, but in academia, in the classroom, with professors, with faculty. I think that that's a huge problem. I think that where these issues exist on campus, the last place I would want them to be occurring, not that you'd ever want them to be occurring anywhere, but the last place you would expect or ever want this stuff to occur would be in a classroom environment, especially as a university. So it's not to say that it's okay anywhere else, but I find it just really disheartening that we hear about this stuff in faculties and in academia. So I think it's important at CSU that we come together and we push at Senate, we push within our respective faculties. This is, again, I think I brought it up last meeting, this is where you as a counselor can email your dean, can email your associate dean, can email people at the university and say, as a CSU rep, as a representative of 35,000 plus undergraduate students, I've heard about this, I don't agree with it, I hope it's not happening in our faculty, and I hope if it is, if you're aware, you're going to do something about it. Make it known, because this is where, when Layla talks about this silence, it's not just people who know that keep things silent, it's people that don't know. It's not speaking up whether you know or not. So by having your voice heard in an affirmative sense, I think it's very, very helpful. So those are my thoughts on this matter.
Alright, thank you. Phil?
I was just going to say that out of curiosity, when was this statement drafted?
Today.
Okay. I was just going to say, if it would have been possible that we could have received statements like these ahead of time, even if it's 2-3 hours via email, we can at least look it over, read it ourselves. I would have enjoyed that.
Great. Thank you. Peter?
Yeah, I would just wanted to make a point on Roy because I understand what you mean that it's better to email the deans and all of that, but I found that right now it's kind of hard time because like I don't think that like you could email them and like technically on CSU we don't really have the power to do that, so like I just don't think that would sound nice if we email to your faculty deans and stuff about like this kind of things. But yeah, there you go.
Thank you. Sophie?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I actually personally would rather that the CSU executive act as quickly as they did in terms of this. I think as counselors, I would rather hear that they're voicing support for survivors after the fact than hear that they haven't voiced anything. While I would have rather have known ahead of time, I think that it's important that these things get addressed as quickly as possible, especially when it is something like sexual misconduct, and it's a very hot topic right now, but it's also something that's affected a lot of people quite personally. And I'd like to just say that if you don't feel comfortable emailing your dean, that's okay too, but it is just an option that Rory gave, and I think it's a good one to reach out and make sure that the administration is being held accountable, especially when students are involved.
Thank you. Rory?
Yeah, just to respond, I think I've said this before about emailing your deans and whatnot, but just to respond to Peter, this is something that you're allowed to do. I've had great success emailing my deans. I've also had great success emailing deans that have never heard from me, nor do they know who the hell I am. And it's just about, being eloquent and, putting things in a polite way, in a respectful way. Oftentimes these people aren't oppositional immediately, especially if they get something out of the blue from someone they haven't heard of that's saying like, I'm concerned. It's just the way you write it. So you're 100% allowed to email people. If you don't get a response, email them again. If you don't get a response, knock on their door. You're a student representative. You've been voted. You've all been elected by these students. So that's part of your job. Like when I have an issue with my taxes and I want to complain about the CRA or the service I've received, who do I write to? I write to my MP. I have an issue with Veterans Affairs, I write to my MP. That's what they're there for. And when I've written to them, they've been like, yeah, we'll have someone, reach out and fix it. And I've actually gotten some really good solutions when I do that. So it's just to say that you are a venue for your students, to help them. So I encourage everyone to do that. I think it's like one of the main things you can do other than coming and meeting in this room and voting on things and talking about things once or twice a month. It's writing to people.
Okay, thank you. Asma?
Yeah, I think there's multiple ways in which counselors and other members in student leadership can be effective in how they communicate their concerns, and one of them is at the board level, and there's other ways through communication. And at the same time, I don't want to just impose that everyone should be at the same communication level and that everyone's able to speak as eloquently as each other. I think it's a learning game. I think some of us learn better through practice, and sometimes we learn through templates. And I think if someone isn't very comfortable approaching a dean, they're not sure where to start, we can always, you can meet us at the CSU office, we could do that. You could approach us, we could do the same for you, I could write emails for you, you guys could come down, we could just talk about approaches, strategies. It's a perfectly safe space to do so. So, certain counselors prefer certain approaches, some prefer to delegate, some prefer to take the onus and, hit the ground running approach. It speaks to our own personality and our own traits, and I think that's perfectly fine. There's nothing, to be too discouraged about, and we're not always going to be coming across some of the issues that we have. So if it's sexual assault, we don't, sometimes we want to be careful about it. And I think the statement that was prepared was, it's a brilliant statement. It allows us to, convey the sentiment very carefully, and also to, reinforce our commitment to our term. And I just kind of think, if there are concerns, it's not something just to bring to council and just, decide there. It's a working arrangement. You can continue, reaching out to us on Messenger and different places, emailing, all those resources are available to you, all those tools. And you're in student leadership yourself too. And, you've got student associations you go back to, you can gauge interests and opinions, you could bring some of that back. That's all part of the feedback process.
Okay, thank you. Jared?
I just want to say, I agree. how the CSU executive team dealt with this, because it was written today, as they said, and then they brought it up in the meeting. It's not like it was written 3, 4, 5 days ago. They let us know as soon as possible, and it was very important that we get this message out as soon as possible. So they got it out, and then they brought it up with us the day that they got it out. So I feel like, you know, in an issue as important as this, especially with what's gone on recently, it's very important that we let it know that we won't stand for that.
Okay, thank you. Peter?
Yeah, so yeah, for Rory, yes, I understand what you mean. Just have a quick question to the executive team. I was just wondering, is there any way possible that we can send out this email to all the faculties and deans as from the CSU as a large body kind of thing, then we send the counselors to go to each faculties and then do that, because it's just kind of no good. So I was really suggesting, if possible, for the executive team as a whole to send out to different deans and associate deans to let them know, and then the counselor can go to students and talk to them about it. So that will be much easier.
Yeah, well, obviously, like all council documents that are public, you're welcome to use those in whatever way you want as a counselor, to send them and say, hey, this was adopted, or whatever you'd like. In this case, I'm preparing, because from the center of the room, I'm guessing that the council is going to sign on to this. I'm preparing a version of this with the CSU letterhead, and it'll be signed on by the CSU, and I can add additionally adopted at council, and then I can put that in the group so that that's available as a document. So you could, if you want to email professors, you could attach it and say, please see attached the CSU statement. I think something to think about, we talked about this with executives, is that this is our first thing we're saying on the statement, acknowledging it's happening, expressing our concern, letting the resources be known. But I definitely think there's a second step here about figuring out what, as students, we are going to ask of our university in order to be accountable regarding these allegations. And I think that's a next step that I'm going to meet with Lisa Oski, with Michaela and Asma for something closely related. And I think that will be a good space to bring up what some of the next steps are from the university's perspective. And I think following that meeting, we'll have a better idea of what public demands should be made to the university. And at that point, I would say that those would be better to circulate with people in power at the university, because it will include kind of an actionable thing rather than just a statement of how we feel. But by all means, if council agrees to sign on to this, I think it's important that it be shared, and that the people who you are surrounded with in your faculties and departments know that this is an issue that is concerning students.
Right. Thank you. Michaela?
I'd like to move for a vote if you are in all agreement to sign off on the statement.
So I guess the motion would be to sign off on the statement then, seconded by John. Your motivation?
I think we've heard a lot of people's opinions around the room, and I think there's kind of a consensus that this is a really great statement, really important, and that we should, make our voices heard, that this is something that really needs to be changed and addressed.
So at this point, there's no speakers list, so if everyone's okay to move to a vote, all those in favor of having the CSU sign off on the letter, please raise your placards. All those opposed? 0, and any abstentions? 0. So that carries unanimously. At this point, we're still in question period and business arising. If anyone has anything else. Yes, Devin?
So I just want to announce that I'm resigning as the BIPOC chair, and Camden is taking over. He's already been attending the meetings, so I just wanted to let people know.
All right. Thank you. Sorry, because everyone kind of made a noise at the same time and gasped.
Yeah, I'm just not sure who is doing the BIPOC right now.
Camden, you know Camden, he sits in the meetings with us. Yeah, so he will be chairing it now. He was already on the committee, and now he's an executive. I just have a lot going on in my life right now, so just reducing the load.
All right, thank you. Okay, I guess at this point we've kind of transitioned into announcements, or does anyone have any more questions or business arising? Asma?
I just want to add that this wasn't included in the appointments, but there is a seat for counselors to sit on the BIPOC committee. So a BIPOC member, we're looking for a counselor. We've got a seat available. And also, Devin, we've got a community member and student at large available as well.
All right, thank you. Okay, so at this point we've kind of transitioned into announcements, so I'll go around the room. Yes, Devin?
Okay, so tomorrow, there was one today, but also tomorrow in the MB foyer, there is the Waste Not Want Not composting fair. I encourage all of you to come. You can win prizes. There's a waste sorting game that I've mentioned in previous reports, and you could potentially win coffee cups, and you can test your knowledge on recycling as well as learning more about composting, as we all agree to support that project. And there's brownies and apples and bananas, and they're all fair trade, so yes.
Thank you. Peter?
No, I was actually more for the one before that, but I
Okay.
don't think he never saw it, so that's fine.
Okay, Robin?
Tomorrow, sorry. Tomorrow is the deadline to, if you want to apply for Recipes for Change. I urge anyone who's interested in social justice and want to learn how to build a successful campaign to register into this workshop. It's a workshop series. It's around 11 workshop series. Also, there's many events and a second workshop that's coming, so check the Facebook page of the CSU. Many events will be posted.
Right, thank you. Are there any more announcements? Okay, Omar?
Move to adjourn.
All right, do you have a second? Rowan? All right, perfect. Meeting adjourned. It's 8:30, everyone.